My wife Sarah and I had talked about getting rid of this huge, clunky wooden cabinet for weeks. It was ancient, heavy as hell, and we wanted to make way for something modern. So we planned to leave it on the curb for citywide cleanup day. One day, after a grueling shift at work, I came home and found that monstrosity already waiting outside for the garbage collectors. Baffled, I asked Sarah about it, and she said that Mark from 5 doors down had helped her move it. Mark. Mark with the biceps and a penchant for taking long walks, with his over-energetic golden retriever. I found it incredibly odd. Sarah never moved heavy objects on her own. In fact, she'd normally wait for me. But Mark? This was suspicious. She said he was out walking the dog when he saw her struggling to move it to the road by herself. Yeah, right. A web of doubt began to form in my mind. Was there something going on between my wife and Beefy Mark, the man who, to my knowledge, only seemed passionate about his dog and probably protein shakes? I needed evidence. I wasn't just going to accuse her of cheating on a mere hunch. Cue the most Hollywood-inspired idea I've ever had. I planted an audio recorder in our bedroom. A quick search online, and I found one tiny enough to be discreet, yet powerful enough to record for hours. It came in the next day, thank God for express delivery. I set it up behind a picture frame on our bedroom shelf. Sarah would never find it there. She hadn't dusted that shelf in months. For 3 days, I left for work with a feeling of dread, hoping not to find anything incriminating, yet needing to know the truth. Each evening, I transferred the recordings to my computer and listened to them on my breaks at work. And on that fateful third day, I heard it, the muffled sounds of Mark's voice, their laughter, and then the unmistakable sounds of intimacy. My heart pounded in my ears. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me. I felt a cold anger boiling inside, mixed with profound sadness. I left work immediately. When I stepped into my own house, there was Mark, standing in my kitchen, shirtless. The audacity! Without a word, I lunged at him, and a primal rage took over. My fist met his jaw, sending him stumbling over the dining room table. I climbed over, each punch a manifestation of my betrayal. I felt like a wild animal defending its territory. Gasping for breath, I eventually stepped back, leaving Mark sprawled on the floor, bleeding and disoriented. I then grabbed him by his hair and dragged his raggedy ass outside, where I gave him a fair amount of slapping for good measure. Then, retrieving my phone from my pocket, I began recording a video explaining to the world why I had turned my driveway into a makeshift boxing ring. It felt important in that surreal moment to have some record of the madness. I went back inside and could hear Sarah's sobs from our bedroom. But as much as the anger churned inside me, I had never and would never lay a hand on her. Storming into the bedroom, I found her huddled on the bed. "Pack your things," I barked, "and get your ass out of here and never come back." She pleaded, tears streaming down her face, begging for another chance. But it was over. The trust had shattered, replaced only by the echo of her betrayal. I told her she was dead to me. "Don't call me, don't text me, just keep your mouth shut and never even speak my name again." I think I got my point across, but this wasn't over yet. I grabbed my phone again, navigating to Facebook. It was time for Mark's wife to know the kind of man she'd married. After a quick search, I found her profile. Apparently, she was an MMA gym kickboxing instructor. My lips curved into a grim smile as I sent her the video. That evening was overwhelming, and I was trying to process everything. The cacophony of emotions inside me was overwhelming. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and oddly, a dash of relief. But when I woke up, my phone was bombarded with notifications. It seemed Mark's wife, the badass kickboxer from the local MMA gym, had seen my message and the accompanying video. She replied with a string of furious messages and expletives, expressing her gratitude for unveiling the truth and promising that Mark was going to pay. In the aftermath, Sarah moved back in with her parents, jobless and shattered. Every once in a while, I'd hear about her through mutual friends or distant relatives. The general consensus was that she regretted her actions deeply, But for me, forgiveness wasn't on the table, and it never would be. As for Mark, let's just say his reputation in the neighborhood took a nosedive. Last I heard, he was attending therapy and had moved out of town, perhaps in search of a fresh start, away from judgmental eyes and vengeful kickboxing instructors. I, on the other hand, was healing, slowly but surely. I actually started attending Elena's kickboxing classes, finding a new way to channel my anger and pain. And one day, after an intense session, we found ourselves at a local cafe, 2 cups of coffee in hand, laughing about the absurdities of life. Would this be a new chapter for me? Maybe. Maybe not. Who knows? All I know is that the scars of betrayal still lingered, but they were fading, replaced by hope, resilience, and the ever-surprising twists of life. I grew up in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else. You can't make a move without someone noticing, and trust me, it has its way of catching up with you. But I never thought it would catch up with me like this. My wife, Emily, came from the next town over. We got married young, and I thought we had the perfect life together. 3 beautiful children, a cozy home, everything a man could want. But then Emily decided to go back to work, and that's when she met Dave. He was the manager at the local hardware store where she started working part-time. Dave was everything a person shouldn't aspire to be: overweight, lazy, stuck in a dead-end job, and a reputedly terrible father and husband. And yet, Emily seemed to mention him far too often, complaining, yes, but mentioning him all the same. Days turned into weeks, and the nagging doubt in the back of my mind became something more tangible. I caught her leaving a Chrome window open on our family computer. This was in the days before smartphones, so our communication was shared there. That's when I saw it. A flirty message thread between Emily and Dave on Facebook, which she had forgotten to log out of. The words danced before my eyes. A horrifying ballet that choreographed the betrayal in vivid detail. I was devastated, outraged, and confused. My emotions were a whirlpool, sucking me in, and I needed to act. I immediately called our sitter and had her come and take over with the kids. I then found Dave's address and drove to his house, a pit growing in my stomach. I had printed the damning messages, evidence of their betrayal. Dave's wife, sweet and humble, was home, and I showed her the papers. Her world crumbled as mine had, and she quickly packed her things, took her child, and left, still talking to her mother on her flip phone, because that's all we had back in the day. I remember her tears, the way she sobbed and clung to her child, her face etched with confusion and pain. It hurt me to see her like that, but it had to be done. I then drove to the hardware store. As I walked in, Emily's face turned white, a look of shock and realization crossing her features. But I didn't even stop, just gave her a stern look that said everything. I found Dave in the back office and pulled him out the back door by his hair, my rage giving me strength I didn't know I possessed. I was furious. Every word, every blow, fueled by betrayal and anger. I hit him hard, letting my fists speak what my words couldn't. He cowered, wetting his pants in fear. His eye blackened, blood spilled from a cut above it. It felt like justice, but it was also just the beginning. I told him that if he didn't want his wife to find out, he'd just keep his mouth shut and take his ass whooping like a man. I decided to let him get that surprise a little later in the day. Afterwards, I walked back inside and cleaned my hands with a white towel from aisle 3, throwing it down on the register where Emily stood, her eyes wide with terror. I stared at her, wanting to see remorse, wanting to see something human in her eyes. But all I saw was a child caught in a lie, crying for being caught. She tried to speak, but I silenced her with a raised hand and left, the shop's bell ringing in my ears like a distant echo. The drive home was a blur, a turmoil of emotions. I packed her things coldly, methodically, like I was packing away a part of my life I never wanted to see again. I drove back to the store, threw her belongings in her car, and confronted her. "You have embarrassed us, our family, our children, and myself in our hometown," I told her, my voice cold and unyielding. "You have acted like a whore, and now go live like one on your own. You do not deserve me or the life I gave you. You have reduced yourself to trash, and now I'm tossing you out like trash. I called your mother and father. Go stay with them or with him or with whomever, I don't care. I told our kids that grandma wasn't feeling well and that you'd be helping her for a while. You can figure out the rest on your own. Then I left her there, sobbing, lost. That evening I found solace with a buddy, venting my rage, trying to find some semblance of peace. He let me beat my frustrations out on his heavy bag and kept me company until I got it all out. I went home, cleaned up, and relieved the sitter. As I held my children that night, the realization of what lay ahead began to sink in. Life had changed in an instant, and the path ahead was a dark one, but I knew I had to walk it for myself and my children. The story was far from over, but I had made my stand. The rest would come in time. A week after the confrontation, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, delicate, and filled with memories. It was from Emily. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly, and opened the envelope. Inside was a confession, an apology, an attempt to explain the inexplicable. Her words flowed across the page, a torrent of emotion and regret. She wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself, but I need you to know how truly sorry I am. I never meant for any of this to happen, but I let myself be swept away by something I didn't understand. You were everything to me, and I betrayed not just you, but our family, our children, and everything we built together. What I did with Dave was a terrible mistake, one that I will regret for the rest of my life. Please believe me when I say that I never stopped loving you, but I lost myself, lost my way, and I don't know how to find my way back. I know that words are cheap, that they can never undo the damage I've done, but I hope in some small way this letter brings you a bit of closure, a bit of understanding. I will always love you, and I will always be grateful for the life we had. I'm so sorry for ruining it. Forever yours, Emily." I read the letter once, then again, the words blurring before my eyes. The pain was there, the betrayal still fresh, and her apology, sincere as it might be, changed nothing. With a sense of finality, I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. It was over. I had moved on. But later that night, something pulled me back. I retrieved the letter from the trash, unfolded it, and read it one more time. Emily's words reached out to me, a cry from a place of darkness and despair. I walked outside, the letter clutched in my hand, and lit a match. The flames caught, and I watched as the paper burned, the words turning to ash, the memories consumed by fire. It was a symbolic act, a way to truly let go, to burn away the last ties that bound me to that painful past. Emily's words, her apology, her love, they were gone, reduced to nothing, just as she had become nothing to me. I stood there watching the embers die, feeling a sense of closure, a sense of peace. The past was behind me, and the future lay ahead, bright and full of promise. I had moved on, and I was free. Days turned into weeks, and the once familiar rhythm of life was disrupted by cold, hard reality. My children needed to know, and I spent sleepless nights agonizing over how to tell them. The void Emily left behind was filled with lawyers, custody agreements, and whispered conversations. I thought about Dave and how he never did call the police. Maybe he was too ashamed, or maybe he understood in some way that he had brought it on himself. Whatever his reasons, I was grateful for one less battle to fight. My kids were resilient, adjusting to the change with a strength that both surprised and inspired me. And through it all, they had me, and I had them. We became a closer family, bound together by our shared experience. Years went by, and the pain began to dull, becoming a scar rather than an open wound. The town still whispered about Emily, and she became known for what she had done, bouncing from man to man, never finding stability. She became a cautionary tale. A part of me wanted to reach out to help her somehow, but another part knew that the bridge was burned, the ties severed. She had made her choice, and she had to live with it. Then, something unexpected happened. I reconnected with an old schoolmate, Sarah. She was beautiful, both inside and out, and had never married. We found comfort in each other, understanding, shared memories, and something more, a chance at love again. We married, and the years that followed were good ones. Sarah embraced my 3 children as her own, and we even had a baby girl together. Life settled into a new normal, one filled with laughter and joy, and the shadow of the past began to recede. Yet a part of me always remembered, always felt the sting of betrayal. Writing this story is my way of letting go, of releasing the last remnants of that dark chapter in my life. I look at my family now, my loving wife, my wonderful children, and I realize that I've been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild, to love and be loved, to find happiness again. I know that I'm fortunate, that not everyone finds this kind of redemption. As for Emily, I sometimes hear about her, but she remains a stranger, a nothing, a painful memory that no longer holds power over me. The lessons of the past shape us, but they do not define us. We choose our paths, and we live with our decisions. In the end, that's all we can do. Choose, live, and move on. For in moving on, we find strength, and in strength, we find ourselves again. Life goes on, and so do we. And as I sit here surrounded by love, looking back at that turbulent time, I can finally say that I'm at peace. I'm home. Hey everyone, welcome to Cheating Secrets Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let's go. I need to get this off my chest. I committed an egregious act of infidelity, and I'm genuinely terrified of being judged. But I don't think I can bear the burden of guilt alone anymore. You see, I cheated on my husband with a poor man, and I feel terrible. A week ago, my husband's birthday bash was held at one of the city's most prestigious clubs, known for its ridiculously high entrance fees and opulent drinks. The air was saturated with a heady mix of expensive colognes and perfumes as individuals clad in the finest couture chatted and laughed. The club's luxurious interior was a testament to its clientele's affluence, adorned with the finest marble and embellished with grand chandeliers that sprinkled diamonds of light across the faces of those who attended. Amid the celebration, I saw him. Not my husband, no. He was busy swaying on the dance floor, his normally austere face alive with joy and excitement. But I, his wife, the woman dressed in an extravagant Versace dress, did not wish to join him. Instead, my attention was drawn to a stranger, a mysterious man who seemed oddly out of place in the opulent surroundings. His eyes were the first thing I noticed, pools of liquid amber that seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. He was handsome, rugged even, with a charm that was inexplicably captivating. I sauntered over, careful not to trip on my Jimmy Choos, and initiated a conversation. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he flashed me a warm, inviting smile. His humble aura was refreshing amidst the overwhelming pretentiousness, and I found myself drawn to him. We exchanged numbers, and it was almost an unspoken agreement that we'd meet again. I took out my phone, the sleek device, a stark contrast to the rustic charm of the man I had just met. I hesitated before typing out a text. I need to leave the club. Upset stomach. Celebrate for both of us. Love you. My heart pounded in my chest as I hit send. The message seemed like a gross oversimplification of the whirlwind of emotions I was experiencing. Almost instantly, my phone buzzed with a reply from my husband. Take care, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. Just get some rest. Love you more. His response was warm, caring, and filled with the love that I was betraying. The words pricked my conscience, but I chose to ignore the nagging feeling of guilt. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from the stranger. Are you coming home with me? I read his message again. There was an unexpected kindness in his words, a consideration that I hadn't anticipated. I left the club then, leaving behind a husband who loved me and entering a world of deceit that would eventually lead me to lose everything I held dear. With a whirlwind of emotions and guilt churning within me, I accompanied the stranger to his place, a hotel that exuded an air of luxury. His room was a stark contrast to the hotel's exterior, devoid of the expected opulence, simple yet tasteful. It held an air of quiet comfort. We spent the night there, and even though I left at dawn, the taste of betrayal lingered. Days later, I found myself craving to see him again, a need driven more by guilt and confusion than genuine affection. When I proposed a meetup, his face took on a look of hesitation. His reluctance puzzled me, but then he confessed, the lavish dinners and the high-end hotel room were out of his league. I was taken aback. I had imagined him to be wealthy, an entrepreneur or a top-tier executive, perhaps. So, I dug into his life, and my world came crashing down. He wasn't wealthy. He worked at a local restaurant chain. The realization felt like a punch in the gut. I had cheated on my wealthy husband, not with an equal, but with a man who earned a fraction of our monthly spending. I felt a sense of loss, a profound disappointment. In my warped reality, I thought it would somehow be better if I confessed to my husband. I rationalized that it wouldn't hurt him as much, that he'd even laugh it off because my lover wasn't rich. So, I spilled everything, the night at the club, the mysterious man, the tryst at the hotel, his true identity. I watched as my husband's face fell, the joy and warmth draining away, replaced by shock, pain, and betrayal. He didn't laugh. He didn't say it was okay, because the man was poor. The tears welled up in his eyes, his expression a tragic mirror of my betrayal. And that's when it hit me, the arrogance, the ignorance, and the shallow mindset that led me to believe that money made a difference. I justified my actions, even felt superior, just because I was wealthier. But I had forgotten that beneath the wealth and the affluence, we were all human. My wealth didn't make my infidelity less significant, and the stranger's lack of it didn't make my betrayal less hurtful. Now, sitting in our luxurious home, surrounded by the silence of my husband's absence, I feel awful. I cheated, and I hurt the people who mattered most. The remorse is immense, a bitter pill that's impossible to swallow. Thankfully, though, I found a man with a good heart, and he's willing to try and look past this mistake for a better future. Update. It's been 3 weeks since my confession, and each day feels like a lifetime. My husband's face, usually soft and loving, was stern and resolute. He had had enough of my arrogance and rudeness. That evening, the mansion was quieter than usual. The servants had retreated, leaving just me and my husband in the grand living room. His face was set, jaw tight, eyes aflame, with a pain that cut me deeper than any words could. "I think you should leave, Penelope," he said, his voice steady. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irrevocable. I was taken aback. "What? You're kicking me out?" I spluttered, clutching the golden embroidery of my Gucci gown. "Just because I cheated with a poor man?" He ran his hands through his hair, a sign of his frustration. "It's not about the man being poor or rich, Penelope," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's about the betrayal. It's about the disregard for our relationship and my birthday." "But I thought you wouldn't care," I retorted, refusing to acknowledge the gravity of my mistake. "He's not even half as wealthy as us." He stared at me for a long moment before shaking his head. "That's your problem, Penelope. You think everything revolves around money, but it doesn't. You betrayed me. You betrayed our marriage." I can stay with him," I countered, a last-ditch attempt to assert control over the situation. At this, my husband merely sighed. The fire in his eyes had died, replaced with a tired resignation. "Perhaps you should," he said, rising from his seat. "It might give you the reality check you desperately need." As he walked away, I was left alone with my thoughts. I had not only lost a loving husband, but it also revealed the ugliness of my character. I had allowed my wealth to blind me from the simple truths of love, trust, and respect. I had yet to comprehend the magnitude of the damage I had done, not only to others, but to myself as well. As I stepped into the glitzy streets, I fumbled for my phone and texted the man I'd spent that ill-fated night with. "Can I come over?" I sent, my heart pounding in my chest. His reply was immediate and brief. Yeah, you can come over. There's something I need to tell you. The ambiguity of his message filled me with unease. Arriving at his modest apartment, I was greeted with a familiar face. His amber eyes held a different kind of warmth now, a warmth that wasn't for me. I found someone, he confessed. My heart sank at his words. She's not like you, he added. She's not interested in fancy clubs or grand parties. She celebrates my birthdays quietly, with a homemade cake and a movie night. His words were a harsh reality check. There he was, a man who'd lived a humble life, moving forward with someone who cherished him for who he was. And there I was, a woman who'd spent her life surrounded by luxury, losing the people who mattered because of my pride and arrogance. His girlfriend wasn't rich. She didn't spend her weekends in luxurious clubs, and she didn't measure people's worth by their bank accounts. But she was happy, and so was he. That was a kind of happiness that my wealth had never brought me and probably never would. As I left his apartment, the weight of my actions crashed down on me. I was alone, cast out due to my shallow mindset and unreasonable behavior. I had lost my husband and the man I'd briefly thought could be a refuge. But this isn't the end. It's a wake-up call, a chance for me to change and become a better person. I've hurt people, I've made mistakes, but I'll strive to learn from them. I'll work on my arrogance, my ignorance, and my rudeness. I've learned that wealth isn't everything, and treating people kindly, regardless of their financial status, is what truly matters. I hope one day I can make amends with my husband and the man I cheated with. I guess the saying is true. The love of money is the root of all evil, and apparently also some really bad decision-making skills. What do you think? When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more. Cheating Secrets Podcast.